I can remember it was around Valentine's Day in 2023. I was at a lunch with one of my direct reports, a director, and a few of his direct reports. We'd been in a strategy session all morning. We were at a restaurant near the office, and this restaurant, I remember, had a glass wall, basically. It was a window that we were sitting near. And then we heard the gunshots. Honestly, it just sounded like a random popping noise to me. As an avid hunter, my direct report recognized what those sounds were immediately, and he instructed us to get under the table for safety. Right there, on the other side of that glass, he saw a man with a gun shoot and injure another man who was frantically trying to open the side door of the restaurant to escape the gunman. He didn't make it inside. After the shot stopped, we crawled to the kitchen, as we were told by the restaurant manager. We stayed there in that kitchen, waiting until the police arrived and cleared the scene. No cell phones. They were scattered around the floors, around turned over tables. Once the police did tell us we could leave, the wait staff brought us our phones, and we were able to go back to what was left of our table to collect our things. When we left, we had to walk right past the victim, right past the paramedics who were working on him. We drove back to the office and we attempted to finish the workday. Again, we tried to finish the workday. I reported the incident to my boss and our HR leader, who suggested that we take the day off, or take the rest of the day off. I was like, yeah, we probably should take the rest of the day off. I was in shock. I don't think I fully processed what had happened until a few months later. But something shifted in me that afternoon that I've never really shifted back from. To this day, I don't sit with my back towards a door when I eat out. I can count on one hand the number of times I've been inside a movie theater since that day, and I've never gone back to that restaurant. And when I finally processed what that afternoon was trying to tell me, it was the same thing that life had already tried to tell me twice. Stop waiting, you're running out of time. My name is LaShawn, and this is Semi-Retired Kind of Life. This is not going to be a I quit my job and now I sit on the beach channel, which I'm certainly not opposed to, just not yet. If you're expecting Dorothy, Blanche, Rose, and Sophia, the Golden Girls version of retirement, where one day you just stop working and that's simply the end of it, that's also not what this is. I named this channel Semi-Retired Kind of Life because I still want to work. I actually like working. What I just didn't like was 60 plus hours a week on someone else's schedule, towards someone else's goals, waiting on a finish line that seemed to keep moving. I realized what I wanted and what I built was something very different. Fewer hours on my schedule, work that funds that travel habit I intend to fully indulge, and more time with the people that matter most, which we'll absolutely most likely get to at some point in time in this channel also. And every time I tell someone that, oh, I have to get back to work, they'll say, but you said you were retired. And then I tell them, I still work. And they say, but you say you were retired. And this channel fills that space between the day-to-day working grind and that time when you get to hang out in your rocking chair or on the beach. Because retirement doesn't have to mean that you stop working or you just stop. It can mean choosing the work that you want to do, defining it on your own terms, not on the terms of some arbitrary number set by Social Security, not your company's terms, but yours. So now let me tell you how I got to this semi-retired kind of life. I started in corporate America at 19 years old as an intern with an international company. And I want to tell you how I approached that internship because it'll probably tell you a little bit about who I am and the habits that I was quietly building even at that time. Initially, that internship program would only allow me to take one class while I was working. They wanted me to get the full experience of working. So basically, I could only take one class. So after that first semester, I was asked to come back. Again, went to the internship office and they said, okay, well, you got an A in that one class while you were working full time. They let me take 3 classes. Again, at the end of that semester, I was asked to come back to that company, went back to the intern office to register again, and they basically said, you know what, do what you want. You took 3 classes, you worked full time. They asked you to come back. You're basically an employee. So after that, I deliberately scheduled all of my college classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays, back to back. So 8 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. every Tuesdays and Thursday, so that on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I could work a full day. So 25 to 30 hours a week, while carrying an 18 semester hour workload at school. So that may sound like it's crazy, but I did that for 2 reasons. I didn't want to delay my graduation any further than 5 years, and I had no plans of taking out any school loans, and those hours were how I paid for it. So I managed to graduate on my birthday in 1994, nearly debt-free. I say nearly debt-free because I had about $2,000 in credit card debt, which I was stressed out about, but I laugh now, $2,000. Probably wondering, I've now graduated, I've got my $2,000 worth of credit card debt. Did the company ask me to stay that I was interning for? They did. So they actually created a role for me, which this was a very difficult decision, but I had been working towards getting my CPA's license as an accountant, and I got 5 job offers from 5 of the big 6 accounting firms at the time. So I had to make that decision, and I deliberately chose the CPA route just simply because that would be the quickest and most direct route to get my CPA's license to meet my 2-year work requirement. And so I went straight into a big 6 accounting firm, and I never looked back. Over the next 30 plus years, I built a career I was genuinely proud of. I went from managing 2 people in my first managerial role in 2000 to managing multiple departments consisting of over 100 people by the time 2023 rolled around. I'd become one of those people that leadership often called when something was broken and needed fixing. And I'll call something out directly here because it's real, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. I was leading multiple teams simultaneously while watching my male peers with comparable titles manage 1 team, maybe 2 at the most. And the research is very clear that women in senior leadership roles often carry disproportionate workloads. I wasn't just imagining it, I was living it. And yet still I stayed, because I was always focused on whatever the next project was, the next task, because I just always felt like I was 5 years away from my magic number, that number where I knew I would be able to retire. And also one more stretch goal from the exit. Always telling myself just 5 more years, and then I can retire. So I've given you kind of my work context for why I've started this channel. Let me tell you a little bit more from the personal side and what was happening underneath all of this during that time at work. Running parallel to everything I just described was nearly a decade as the primary caregiver for my mother. From 2008 until she passed away in 2018, she had been diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's and dementia in her early 50s. I was her primary caregiver. Researchers call it the double shift, the phenomenon where women carry a disproportionate share of the caregiving and household responsibilities on top of an already oversized professional demand. For me, that was not a metaphor or statistic, that was my everyday life. The financial cost was real. The emotional and physical cost was real. And it's a story that deserves its own deep dive, honest conversation, which, I may do in a future video. But what I want to tell you about today is what happened when it ended. When my mother passed, something unexpected happened alongside me being in my grief. I also felt clarity about how short life really is and about how much time I'd been spending in the service of other people, and knowing that in the end, no matter how much time I gave them, it was never going to matter. It was never important to them. I will say I got a huge promotion and raise that December, and I knew exactly how I was going to use that money. I made a vow to now spend more time with my father and the rest of my family because I only had one parent left, and I kept it. That next September, I took my dad and my stepmother to Hawaii for their 30th wedding anniversary, a bucket list trip of a lifetime. One of the most beautiful places I've ever been. And I got to share that with my dad. It was a really wonderful week. And I'm really grateful that I got to have that experience. In keeping with that vow to spend more time with my family, I was already planning a week for Thanksgiving to spend at my family. But sadly, my dad passed away the week before Thanksgiving. So before I was supposed to arrive. That was the ultimate reminder. It felt like barely any time had passed since we were just in Hawaii, and now my dad was gone. I made the vow again, louder this time. More family, more presence with my family, more time spending on my life. I was going to be the auntie who showed up for my nieces and nephews, for my stepmother. So I started planning a trip to Disney World for all of us, because that's what that time should be for. And then COVID happened. So our Disney trip postponed. Disney World was closed the week we had originally booked to go. But I was still going to do this. Was going to manage to do this. So we now postponed Disney to the summer of 2021. But somehow between the 2 years that my dad passed away and that Disney trip and being locked down in COVID, I lost myself again and got kind of locked in that corporate America cycle. Just got sucked right back into corporate America. And there I was again. I had to make that vow again to make sure that I didn't spend all of my time at work and that I was spending time with my family, making that deliberate choice to spend time with my family. This is not a unique corporate America story. The gravitational pull is real. One urgent email, meeting, or one urgent deadline at a time until you look up and realize you're right back where you started. You're just a little bit older. And it took something that I didn't plan for to finally break that gravitational pull for good. So that brings us back to February of 2023. You already know what happened at that restaurant. But now you have the full picture of what I was carrying, what was on my mind when I crawled across that floor to the kitchen to get away from a potential gunman. I'd already spent nearly a decade as a primary caregiver for my mother. I lost both of my parents within 15 months of each other. And I'd already made the vow to live more and work less twice. And I'd already failed twice. And I was at that restaurant for a strategy session. Nothing else, just for a strategy session. The shock took months to settle. I went back to the office that afternoon until HR literally told me to go home. I didn't talk about it much, but in the months that followed, as the behavioral changes quietly took hold, as I started thinking twice about where I sat in a restaurant, movie theaters became something that I just didn't want to do unless I was absolutely certain I could sit by an emergency exit. The question I kept coming back to wasn't really what almost happened. It was, what am I going to do with the time that I have left, that I'm fortunate to still have left? So I invited my nieces and my nephew to a fabulous auntie trip to celebrate my nephew's high school graduation. A 2-week cruise through the Mediterranean in June of 2023. And of course, so he came along, my nieces, my stepmother. The trip I had promised after my dad passed away, I needed to pay that off first. But after that, I would start winding down my time in corporate America. I'd even given my now fiance the warning that any day now, I might turn in that resignation. It could happen. I just didn't know. But I want to be clear. I didn't rage quit. I didn't have a dramatic confrontation or any satisfying moment that you would find in a movie. I planned my exit the same way I'd planned everything else in my life, deliberately. I'd spent years putting money away in my deferred compensation plan, understanding my retirement math. Once my deferred compensation account balance was greater than the amount I owned on my mortgage, I realized I could leave. Building that financial foundation meant I could leave without needing the next corporate paycheck or someone telling me how I was going to cover my life. I would really only need cash for living expenses and travel. Always have to fund the travel, right? Later that year, my company was planning a round of layoffs. They had become pretty routine by that time. The random meeting with your manager that wasn't on your calendar the night before when you logged off, but it was the next morning when you logged on, could only mean one thing. When I joined the call with my manager and there was no HR person there in attendance, I knew that I'd been spared. But I want to tell you exactly what I felt in that moment. You may think it was relief. It wasn't relief. The moment I realized, I felt disappointment. Let that sink in for a second. I was disappointed that I was not being let go. And that's when I felt it. I knew it. There was nothing left for me to wait for in corporate America. I decided to turn in my notice. I just had to do a little simple tax planning first, ensuring that I wouldn't get my deferred compensation payout in 2023 to avoid being in a higher tax bracket. So once I was able to confirm I wouldn't get that payout until 2024, I immediately turned in my notice and I sold my company stock. So there you have it. I'm semi-retired. I'm not retired in the Golden Girl sense. I still work. I choose to still work. I built a contract accounting and consulting practice. I do fractional controller work on my schedule using everything I spent 35 years learning and earning. The difference is I work because I want to and because of my travel habit, not because a corporate paycheck is the only thing standing between me and my life. So that's what semi-retired kind of life is about. The space between that grind at work and getting to your retirement and your rocking chair. It's for the people, and I'm sure there are a lot of us who are not ready to stop, but are absolutely done doing work or doing this on someone else's terms. This channel is about the math of finding your magic number, the travel, the time with your family, the identity questions that no one warned you about. And yes, there will probably be some fabulous auntie moments too, because those matter. Life reminded me 3 times before I finally listened, and I'm glad I did. If any part of this story sounds like yours, if you've ever said just 5 more years and felt that the finish line kept moving, this channel is for you. I'm LaShawn. This is Semi-Retired Kind of Life. Hype, like, subscribe, and come back, and let's figure this out together.